Well, it's interesting because I this is one of the things that I was thinking about. Like, is it only lobbying? I mean, it is and it isn't. Like, I mean, the idea is lobbying important? Yes. But if you lobby, if you try to kind of convince someone of a narrative that is not easily understandable by those whom you're talking to, then you're not going anywhere. Okay. So it becomes easy for, say, the Zionist narrative to say, oh, well, the American culture is based on Christianity and that's close to Judaism and the Judeo-Christian tradition and so on, right? It becomes easier to accept the story, right? But part of the bigger problem is how Islam and Muslims and Arabs have been racialized that makes them so foreign, right? Now, you asked me the question, when will be a Palestinian lobby that will be powerful enough to change the policy? I don't know. And it's honestly, it's hard to tell. And I'm not sure that that's it might be part of the story, part of the answer to the predicament we are facing globally, right? But I also think people, when they change their minds, they slowly change policy. Policy will ultimately follow. And I think now, for the first time in a couple of weeks ago, about a month ago, actually, new data has shown that there are more Americans who are sympathetic with Palestinians than Israel, literally for the first time in history. Okay. So we're headed in that direction. And if politicians aren't responding to their constituents and what they demand and what they ask for, that's going to change ultimately. I mean, those in positions of power will be outvoted by people who are responding to their constituents. So sooner or later, the Palestinian narrative will make it into politics. In addition to this, I also want to mention lobbying. We talk about lobbying, and oftentimes we think about like going to Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., talking to Congress folks, and right. But I also think lobbying is also advocacy, to talk about equality, talk about Palestinian equal rights, and so on. I also consider that part of the idea of lobbying, right? And then in addition to this, I also think someone like, say, Gigi Hadid, Bella Hadid, Muhammad Hadid, their father, right, who are very important in kind of in the fashion world. They're celebrities. When they talk about Palestine, they also change opinions, change views. And I'm not saying necessarily that everyone needs to be like Gigi Hadid, in order for them to influence policy. Not necessarily, but I do believe that people who have no reason, they have no connection, they don't come across anything related to Palestine.
Yeah.
If they are able to hear that sort of a story, it affects them and it changes their views. Now, when is that going to happen? It's a good question, but I definitely feel ultimately that justice for Palestinians will be served one way or another, and it will be, I think, obviously, I'm hoping that it will be in a very peaceful way where equality will prevail and be the kind of the standard by which people think about how do we create equal rights? How do we create a place for people to live equally and have access to resources and not one more privileged than the other? But I do believe that we're headed in that direction. You cannot just completely ignore people's justice indefinitely. That's never going to work and never has ever. I mean, if history tells us anything, that has never worked.